officer sa India ang sumaklolo sa isang lalaking kamuntik magulungan ng umaandar na tren.
Ang mga kasunod na pangyayari sa insidente ating alamin mula sa mga detalye ng balitang ibabahagi maya-maya. Magandang gabi. Ako po si Rikki Mathay.
Ako si Rikki, Alagao, Flores. Ito ang mata ng Agila International para naman sa mga headlines ngayong araw ng Miyerkules.
Bilang ng mga krimen sa buong Pilipinas, bumaba ng mahigit 26%.
Pilipinas magsasampa ng panibagong protesta dahil sa reckless maneuver ng isang Chinese chopper sa B-4 aircraft.
US President Donald Trump inakusahan ang Ukraine na sila ang nagsimula ng gyera laban sa Russia.
Higit sa 150 mga balyena na stranded sa Tasmania, Australia.
At South Korea, sinabi may access of bite dance sa mga data ng deep sea. Buwaba ng 26.76% ang bilang ng naitalang krimen sa buong Pilipinas ayon po yan sa Philippine National Police o PNP.
Batay sa datos ng PNP, umabot kasi sa 3,528 na mga kaso ng krimen ang kanilang naitala mula January 1 hanggang February 14, 2025. Mas mababa ito kung ikukumpara sa naitala na 4,817 cases noong kaparehong panahon ng nakaraang taon. Kabilang sa kaso ng krimen na bumabay ang theft, robbery, rape, murder, homicide, physical injury at carnapping ng motorsiklo at motor vehicles. Ayon kay PNP Chief Police General Romel Francisco Marbil, nakatulong sa pagbaba ng krimen ang kanilang tuloy-tuloy na anti-criminality operation, pinaigting na intelligence at investigative operation sa laban sa mga criminal networks.
Pumalo na po sa 6 na katao ang nasawi dahil sa mga nararanasang pag-ulan dulot ng shear line. Batay sa datos ng National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council o NDRRMC, isa ang nawawala sa Oriental Mindoro na siyang tinututukan na nagpapatuloy na operasyon doon. Aabot naman sa 30,000 na pamilya o mahigit 107,600 individuals ang apektado ng masamang panahon mula sa 116 na barangay sa Palawan at Oriental Mindoro. Kasama sa nasabing numero, mahigit 2,000 na pansamantalang nanunuluyan sa mga evacuation centers. Samantala, 4 na bayan sa Palawan ang nagdeklara ng state of calamity dahil sa epektong dulot pa rin ng shear line.
Nakahanda ang Pilipinas na maghain ng diplomatic protest dahil sa reckless maneuvers ng Harbin Z-9 helicopter ng China laban sa isang Cessna plane ng Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources o BFAR sa Panatag Shoal. Ayon sa National Maritime Council o NMC, ang tahasang mapanganib na pagkilos ng Chinese plane sa BFAR aircraft ay naglagay sa panganib ng mga piloto at pasaherong nakasakay rito. Iniulat ng Philippine Coast Guard na lumipat ang Chinese helicopter sa tabi ng BFAR aircraft sa layong 3 meters. Kaya obserbasyon ng marami ay halos magkabungguan ang dalawang aircraft. Sinabi rin ng NMC na hindi makakapigil ang illegal, coercive at agresibong pag-uugali ng China sa Pilipinas upang ipagpatuloy nito ang pagsasagawa ng mga regular na operasyong pandagat nito alinsunod sa soberanya nito sa Panatag Shoal. Ipinaalala rin ng Konseho sa China na ang Pilipinas ang siyang may jurisdiction sa Panatag Shoal na nasa 124 nautical miles lamang mula sa Zambales at nasa loob din nila ng exclusive economic zone ng Pilipinas.
Nakatakdang dinggin ng Korte Suprema sa April 22, 2025, alas 2 po ng hapon ang petisyong kumukwestiyon sa legalidad ng Republic Act No. 11954 o ang Maharlika Investment Act of 2023. Hiniling din ng mga petitioners na maglabas ang korte ng temporary restraining order at writ of preliminary injunction upang pigilan ang implementasyon ng nasabing batas. Nanindigan ang mga petitioners na bigo umano ang Maharlika Investment Act na sumunod sa legislative process na kinakailangan sa ilalim ng konstitusyon. Bukod sa hindi pagsunod sa constitutional requirement, iginiit ng mga petitioners na hindi rin daw pasok sa economic viability test ang naturang batas at nilabag din umano ng Maharlika Investment Act ang independence ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas o BSP. Samantala, isinama ng Korte Suprema bilang mga respondents sa kaso ang BSP, Land Bank of the Philippines at Development Bank of the Philippines. Inatasan ang mga ito ng Korte na maghain ng kani-kanilang mga komento sa loob ng 10 araw.
Kahit naka-recess at walang mangyayaring pagdinig sa impeachment laban kay Vice President Sara Duterte, ay naghahanda na ang Senado para rito. Ayon kay Senate President Francis Cheese Escudero, nagkaroon na ng mock setup sa plenaryo ng Senado kahapon. May ilalagay niya na upuan para sa mga defense at prosecution lawyers, habang sa gitnang bahagi naman ng plenaryo ay ang witness stand.
Ininspeksyon kung kinain na nga ba ng anay yung mga dating ginamit na lamesa at witness stand, nilocate, nilagay sa kanya-kanya mga lugar, at nang makita kung ano pa yung mga kailangan gawin at paghandaan. Dahil gaya ng sinabi ko, dahil naisampa na ang impeachment, may katiyakan na magkakaroon ng impeachment trial at kailangan itong paghandaan ng Senado. Hindi namin inaaksaya yung aming panahon bagaman recess sa paghahanda kaugnay nito.
Dagdag pa ni Escudero, hihintayin na lamang nila ang magiging pasya ng Korte Suprema sa isyong ito kung pwede bang utusan ng Supreme Court ang Senado na magdaos na ng impeachment trial kahit naka-recess ito.
The Senate will perform its duty and function under the Constitution unless there is a TRO, a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction issued by the Supreme Court. Absent that, we will continue with our duty regardless of the pendency of any case thus filed as of now or that may be filed in the future.
Kaugnay nito ay naghain ng mga abogado ni VP Sara ng petisyon sa Korte Suprema na kumukwestiyon sa legalidad at constitutionality ng ika-4 na impeachment case laban sa kanya sa Kamara. Hinihiling ng bise sa Korte na mag-issue ito ng temporary restraining order upang pigilan ang Senado sa pagsasagawa ng impeachment trial at sa anumang pag-akto sa ika-4 na impeachment case. Kabilang sa legal team ni VP Sara ay ang kanyang ama na si dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. At hiniling nila na ipawalang bisa at isang tabi ng Korte Suprema ang ika-4 na impeachment complaint. Depensa ng kampo ng bise ang nakasaad daw sa konstitusyon kung saan binanggit ang one-year bar rule o pagbabawal sa pagsasagawa ng impeachment proceedings sa parehong opisyal sa loob ng 1 taon. Dahil dito, labag-an nila sa nasabing probisyon ang pang-4 na impeachment. Iginiit pa ng legal team ni VP Sara na nakagawa ng grave abuse of discretion ang Kamara nang hintayin nito ang 4th impeachment kahit may naunang 3 impeachment complaints. Ayon naman sa Fortuna Narvasa and Salazar Law Office, may hawak na kaso o may hawak sa kaso ng bise, tiwala ang pangalawang Pangulo na gagawin ng kataas-taasang hukuman ang tungkulin nito sa ilalim ng konstitusyon na protektahan ang demokrasya at masunod ang rule of law.
Sisimulan na po ng Department of Agriculture ang mga reklamo na kanilang natatanggap na mayroong bukbok na nakita sa bigas na ibinebenta sa Kadiwa stores sa lungsod ng Quezon. Ayon kay Agriculture Assistant Secretary Arnel de Mesa, kanila nang tinitignan na mabuti kung ang mga ibinibenta bigas sa Murphy Market sa Quezon City ay dumaan ba sa masusing pagsusuri. Binigyan diin ng kalihim na maaaring maituturing na isang isolated case ang nasabing insidente dahil ito ay kanila lamang natanggap. Sa kabila po nito ay sinisiguro ng ahensya na ang mga bigas na galing sa mga bodega ng National Food Authority ay nasa magandang kalidad bago ito itinda sa iba't ibang pamilihan sa buong Pilipinas.
Inanunsyo ng Department of Tourism na magsisimulang mag-ikot ang prestihiyosang Michelin Guide sa Pilipinas. Ayon sa ahensya, nakatuon ang Michelin Guide sa rehiyon ng Metro Manila, Cebu at iba pang mga lugar sa bansa katulad ng Pampanga, Tagaytay at Cavite. Magsisimula ito sa susunod na taon para itampok ang mga magagandang dining destinations ng ating bansa. Inaasahan rin na ma-feature sa trip ng Michelin Guide ang mga talentadong chefs ng ating bansa para ipakilala sa mundo ang culinary traditions ng Pilipinas. Samantala, malugod namang tinanggap ni Tourism Secretary Cristina Frasco ang pagbisita ng Michelin Guide sa Pilipinas. Anya, isang milestone ito para sa Pilipinas, partikular sa tourism sector ng bansa. Binigyan din ng kalihim na ang mga pagkaing Pinoy ay bahagi ng ating pagkakakilanlan at isang behikulo rin para iparana sa mga turista ang maiinit na pagtanggap sa kanila ng Pilipinas. Susunod, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky kinansela ang pagbisita nito sa Saudi Arabia.
US President Donald Trump may mabigat na paratang laban sa Ukraine.
At Israel at Qatar naghahanda na sa pangalawang yugto ng ceasefire. Iba pang mga balita sa pagbabalik ng mata ng Agila International.
Yun na lang yan sa Net 25. Ito ang tahanan. Ako po si Ate Sherilyn.
This time, let's take a broader perspective, focusing not just on the awards, but on the thought behind staging awards. Dr. Ronel Ibanez, founder of Asia's Golden Icon Awards, takes us behind the scenes on award events as he talks about his leadership, philanthropy, and iconic mission in recognizing leaders.
We are committed to give back to our community. From the real estate to the award-giving body, all of this, part of the proceeds of that goes to the foundation.
Open for business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Sunday 25. Uy! Andyan pala kayo! Gusto nyo bang matuto ng mga nutritional food at easy recipe? Abangan ninyo kami tuwing alas 8 hanggang alas 9 ng umaga, Saturday and Sunday. Dito lang yan sa Ito ang Tahanan.
Australia na sumusunod ito sa mga obligasyon ukol sa supply ng aluminum sa Estados Unidos. Ito ay sa gitna ng hiling ng Canberra na ma-exempt sa taripa ng US. Si Emmy Capilita Roja para sa balita.
Ayon kay Australian Trade Minister Don Farrell, tumutugon ang bansa sa mga pananagutan nito kaugnay ng pagsusupply ng aluminyo sa Estados Unidos. Kamakailan, humiling ito ng pagtatangi sa taripa na ipinataw ng US sa aluminyo at bakal na ini-import ng bansa.
We have complied, I believe, with all of the obligations in terms of our export arrangements into the United States. There's nothing that Australian companies or the Australian governments have done that conflict with any arrangements that were in place. And that's what we'll continue to do. But I make the point, our sales of aluminium and steel to the United States are dropping because this government is encouraging companies to find alternative markets.
Samantala, nagpahayag si US President Donald Trump na maaari nitong bigyan ng exemption ng Australia mula sa 25% taripa sa steel and aluminum imports. Subalit ito ay bago siya abisuhan na pinapatay ng Australia ang aluminum market ng US. Ayon sa executive order ukol sa taripa, tumaas ang dami ng aluminyo mula sa Australia matapos itong bigyan ni Trump ng tariff exemption noong 2018. Kaugnay nito, sinabi ni Farrell na ang pagtataas ng supply ng aluminium mula sa Australia ay may pahintulot ng administrasyon ni dating Pangulong Joe Biden matapos ang pagkukulang ng supply mula sa Russia dahil sa gera.
It makes no sense for the Americans to apply a tariff to a country where they've got a deficit. Just to explain, total two-way trade between Australia and the United States is roughly $100 billion. $70 billion of that is product we buy from America. $30 billion is product we sell.
Ang Australia ay ika-6 sa pinakamalalaking aluminum producer sa mundo. Nagpapasok ito ng 1% ng steel imports sa US at 2% naman ng aluminium imports ng bansa. Emi Capilita Roja para sa mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Kinumpirma po ng tanggapan ng United Nations Human Rights na 3 bata ang pinaslang ng Rwanda-backed M23 rebels. Ayon sa report, ang mga batang nasawi ay nakasuot pa ng Congolese Army uniforms. Leo Velasco para sa balitang yan.
3 bata ang patay matapos pasukin ng mga rebeldeng M23 ang bayan ng Bukavu sa Congo. Ayon sa takapagsalita ng UN Human Rights na si Ravina Shamdasani, armado ang mga batang nasawi. Isinalaysay nito ang naging enkwentro ng mga batang Congolese sa grupo ng M23.
On the 16th of February, in a neighborhood called the Latin Quarter in Bukavu, 3 boys were killed during an altercation with members of M23. According to information collected through reliable sources, the 3 boys, who are yet to be identified, were carrying weapons collected in an abandoned FARDC camp and were intercepted by the M23. They refused to disarm, and during an exchange of fire that subsequently erupted, the 3 children were killed. Family members have not yet claimed the bodies. We can't confirm their exact ages at this moment as well. But what we are trying to do is to confirm some of the reports that we're receiving. These are alarming enough that we felt we had to make them public.
Nanawagan si Shamdasani sa M23 at sa Rwanda na sumusuporta sa mga rebelde na walang karapatang pantao ang nasasalangsang sa pagsalakay nito sa Congo.
Our office has confirmed cases of summary execution of children by M23 after they entered the city of Bukavu last week. We're also aware that children were in possession of weapons. We call on Rwanda and M23 to ensure that human rights and international humanitarian law are respected. We're also documenting cases of ill treatment, conflict-related sexual and gender-based violence, child and forced recruitment, intimidation, and death threats.
Dagdag ni Shamdasani, maraming sumbong ukol sa karasang sexual sa Goma ang kanilang tinatanggap. Nagbahagi rin ng pag-aalala si Shamdasani para sa kapakanan ng mga mamamahayag, human rights defenders at mga miyembro ng civil society organizations na humihingi ng proteksyon laban sa pagganti ng M23.
So we have received reports in the past as well, but since Goma has been taken, we have received a lot of cases of sexual violence. Again, sexual violence is notoriously difficult to document and to get an accurate figure on, but we have received a lot of cases of sexual violence since Goma was taken.
Samantala, dinitalya naman ni UN High Commissioner for Refugees spokesperson Matthew Saltmars kung gaano karami na ang lumilikas dahil sa tumitinding tensyon at karahasan sa DRC.
UNHCR can confirm that between 10,000 and 15,000 people have crossed into Burundi over the last few days, fleeing escalating tensions and violence in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The majority of those arriving are Congolese, mainly from the Bukavu area in South Kivu, where the situation is deteriorating. A smaller number of Burundian nationals have also returned to their country, fleeing the clashes. People are mainly arriving at the Gatumba border post, close to the capital, Bujumbura.
Leo Velasco para sa mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Sinabi ni Brigadier Andy Watson na handa ang British Army na i-deploy sa Ukraine kung hihilingin ng gobyerno. Kasalukuyang nasa Romania ang 2,500 troops ng High Readiness Force, ang 1st Division ng British Army para sa exercise Steadfast Dart ng NATO. Ayon sa media sources, ang pagsasanay ng mahigit 10,000 puwersa ng 8 NATO countries ay nasa layong 16 miles lamang mula sa Ukraine. At kahit na nga'y pinagbabawal sa mga sundalo ang paggamit ng mobile phone sa NATO drills, karamihan sa kanila ay may kaalaman na may paunang pag-uusap na posibleng i-deploy sila sa Ukraine. Ngunit niliwanag ni Brigadier Watson na mag-aambag lamang ng puwersa ang United Kingdom sa Kyiv. Sinang-ayunan ng maraming military experts ang pahayag ni Watson dahil dapat anilang magpadala ng 100,000 peacekeepers ang NATO sa loob ng Ukraine upang masiguro na ligtas ito mula sa Russia. Kinikilala rin ni British Prime Minister Keir Starmer na parehong nakataya ang kinabukasan ng United Kingdom at ng Ukraine sa pagtatapos ng Kyiv-Moscow War. Para naman kay Mark Lyle Grant, dating British National Security Advisor ni former Prime Minister Theresa May, mahalaga ng pangunahan ng Britain ang usapin ukol sa Ukraine dahil kritikal anya ang pagtatapos sa Moscow-Kyiv War hindi lamang sa Estados Unidos kundi maging sa Europa.
At stake is not just the future of Ukraine, it is an existential question for Europe as a whole, and therefore vital for Britain's national interest.
I think it's important that Britain shows a leadership role when it comes to Ukraine, as we have really since the beginning, or at least since the full-scale invasion in 2022. But obviously it's just putting down a marker because we're nowhere near the stage where any form of stabilization force or peacekeeping troops are going to be required in Ukraine. Nonetheless, if and when that happens, it's right that Britain should be involved, not necessarily in the leading role, but certainly making a significant contribution to any international force which helps to sustain and patrol an acceptable peace agreement for Ukraine.
Sa iba pa mga balita, sinabi naman ng German Chancellor na dapat magkaisa ang Estados Unidos at European Union ukol sa post-war security ng Ukraine. Marjorie Quintos po para sa balitang yan.
Noong Martes, sinabi ni German Chancellor Olaf Scholz na pagdating sa seguridad ng Ukraine pagkatapos ng giyera, dapat na magkasamang tiyakin ito ng US at ng EU.
Es ist ganz klar, dass es keine Entscheidung über die Köpfe der Ukraine hinweg geben darf. Das ist eine souveräne demokratische Nation, der wir den Weg in die Europäische Union eröffnet haben und die hart daran arbeitet, die vielen rechtlichen Herausforderungen zu bestehen, die damit verbunden sind. Und das darf nicht in Frage gestellt werden. Es ist ein Land, das selbst darüber entscheidet, unter welchen Bedingungen es bereit ist, einen Waffenstillstand, Frieden zu ermöglichen. Das sollten wir nicht tun.
Ani Scholz, walang desisyon ang dapat gawin kung hindi kasama ang Ukraine sa usapan. Kasabay nito, nanawagan ng German Chancellor na dapat magkaisa ang mga kaalyado ng Kyiv na tulungan ito para sa kinabukasan ng bansa.
Und es ist ein Land, das auf alle Fälle in der Zukunft eine starke eigene Armee benötigt, die wir wahrscheinlich, weil sie von der Wirtschaftskraft des Landes nicht getragen werden kann, als Europäer, als transatlantische Partner, als USA und Kanada, als Freunde der Ukraine in aller Welt gemeinsam mit unterstützen müssen, auch in der Zukunft. All das sind unabdingbare Voraussetzungen für alles andere, was wir diskutieren. Und manchmal werden jetzt Sachen diskutiert, die eben noch gar nicht anstehen, weil die ersten Schritte da sind. Klar ist, dass die Europäische Union genauso wie die USA einen Beitrag zur Sicherung des Friedens, wenn denn endlich einer zustande gekommen wäre, leisten müssen. Das darf aber keine Aufteilung der Sicherheit und der Involviertheit zwischen den USA und Europa geben. Und wie gesagt, nicht den vierten Schritt vor dem ersten machen. Der erste ist, dass Russland einsehen muss, dass es seinen verbrecherischen Angriffskrieg nicht einfach fortsetzen kann.
Ang pahayag na ito ni Scholz ay habang nagkasundo naman ng US at Russia na ipagpatuloy ang usapin ukol sa pagwawakas ng labanan sa Ukraine matapos ang isinagawang usapan sa Saudi Arabia. Samantala, wala ang Ukraine sa isinagawang pag-uusap. Marjorie Quintos para sa Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Nagpasya si Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky na kanselahin ang kanyang pagbiyahe sa Saudi Arabia matapos na hindi siya isama sa pag-uusap ng Estados Unidos at Russia.
Мені не все одно, щоб партнери про нас щось зайве подумали. А ми абсолютно чесні, відкриті. Я не хочу співпадінь. І тому я не поїду в Саудівську Аравію. Ми зв'язались з нашими партнерами в Саудівській Аравії. У мене хороші дуже відносини з його Royal Highness, так, з Мухаммедом. Ми тільки що зв'язались і домовились, що 10 березня я буду з офіційним візитом. А в Сполучені Штати ми їх очікуємо в Києві.
Sinabi ni Zelensky na nakatakda sana itong bumisita sa Saudi Arabia ngayong linggo, ngunit tinuturing nitong malaking kawalan ng respeto sa kanya at sa kanyang kapwa mga Ukrainians ang hindi pag-iimbita sa kanya sa naturang diskusyon. Giit nito, nais nilang tuluyang matapos ng kaguluhan nila ng Russia. Ngunit walang dapat magpasya kung papaano matatapos ang digmaan nito ng Russia, kundi ang Ukraine lamang. Nasurpresaan niya ito at maging ang mga mamamayan ng Ukraine dahil tira isinulong ng Estados Unidos at Russia ang kanilang dialogo kahit walang kumatawan na galing sa Ukraine ang nakadalo. Inaasahan naman ni Zelensky ang pagbisita ng ilang opisyal ng US sa kanilang bansa para sa ceasefire.
Можете обговорювати що завгодно, але не можна приймати рішення без України, як завершити війну в Україні. Ті чи інші умови. І нас не запрошували на цю зустріч, російсько-американську зустріч в Саудівській Аравії. Для нас це було сюрпризом, я думаю, так, як і для багатьох. Переконаний, для України, для нашого регіону і для Європи принципово, щоб будь-які перемовини щодо закінчення війни відбувались не за спиною у ключових суб'єктів, яких зачіпають наслідки російської агресії.
Pinasaringan pa nito ang administrasyon ni Donald Trump dahil sa biglang pag-atras ng suporta ng Estados Unidos sa pagsali nito sa North Atlantic Treaty Organization o NATO. Ang pag-anib ng Ukraine sa NATO ang isa sa mariing ipinaglalaban ng administrasyon ni former President Joe Biden na naantala lamang dahil sa mga kaalyado ng Russia na parte rin ng organisasyon.
Мені здається, на сьогодні зрозуміло, що зброєю на полі бою в цій війні не переможе жодна з сторін. Знаємо, що вони і ще кілька європейських партнерів не підтримують наше членство в НАТО. Я вважаю, що це велике бажання Росії, воно співпадає з цим результатом.
Posibleng sa susunod na linggo ay matutuloy na ang pagkikita ni US President Donald Trump at Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Марко Рубио в начале нашей беседы особо подчеркнул принципиальную важность в международных отношениях для каждой страны руководствоваться своими национальными интересами. Мы с этим полностью согласились. Согласились и в том, что эти национальные интересы, конечно, не всегда, далеко не всегда будут совпадать, но когда они не совпадают, очень важно регулировать эти несовпадения, не пускать их на самотек и тем более не провоцировать конфронтацию военного и всякого иного рода.
Pinuri ni Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov si United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio ukol sa pananaw nito sa ugnayan ng dalawang bansa at paninindigan nito sa national interest ng Estados Unidos. Sinabi pa niyang sa kabila ng hindi pagkakaintindihan ay parehas lamang ang Russia at US sa kanilang mga layunin. Dagdag pa nito na ito ay posible ng isagawa matapos ang matagumpay na pag-uusap ng negotiating team nila sa Saudi Arabia. Umaasa din itong sa lalong madaling panahon ay maitalaga na ang ambassador to the United States sa Moscow at ang ambassador to Russia ng Washington.
Ну и третье, так в широком концептуальном плане, создавать условия по мере процессов, связанных с урегулированием кризиса на Украине, параллельно создавать условия для того, чтобы наше сотрудничество возобновилось в полном объеме и расширилось на самые разные сферы. Был большой интерес, который мы разделяем, в том, чтобы возобновить консультации по геополитическим проблемам. включая различные конфликты в различных частях мира, там, где и у США, и у России присутствуют интересы, и была большая заинтересованность в том, чтобы снять искусственные преграды на пути развития взаимовыгодного экономического сотрудничества.
Noong nakaraang linggo ay tinawagan ni Trump sina Putin at Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky kung saan tinalakay dito ang pagtatapos ng giyera ng dalawang panig. Sa isang press conference pa ni Trump ay pinuri nito ang kagustuhan ni Putin na magbago ang sitwasyon sa frontline ng digmaan. At nung tinanong naman kung may balak siyang kitain si Putin bago matapos ang buwan, ay sinabi ni Trump na isa itong posibilidad ngayon.
The Russia talks, your impression of how they went today, and if you're perhaps more confident or less confident of a deal after what happened today?
Well, much more confident. They were very good. Russia wants to do something. They want to stop the savage barbarianism. I mean, what's going on over there? It's soldiers are being killed by the thousands on a weekly basis. It's ridiculous.
Sa kanyang pinakabagong press conference ay tila pinasaringan ni US President Donald Trump si Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at inakusahan pa nito ang Ukraine na sila raw ang nagsimula ng giyera sa Russia.
And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way, and President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue.
Tinawag pa ni Trump na mahinang negotiator umano si Volodymyr Zelensky dahil umano sa pagpayag nito na tumagal ng halos 3 taon ang digmaan nila ng Moscow. Kasunod ito ng pagkondena ng mga kaalyado nito sa Europa sa ura-uradang pagsulong nito ng negotiation talks nang hindi man lamang kinokonsulta ang lahat ng sangkot sa digmaan. Sinabi nitong nagkaroon ng magandang resulta ang naging usapan ng dalawang bansa sa kabila ng pagboses ni Zelensky ng kanyang panlulumo sa hindi pag-imbita sa kanya sa naturang dialogo sa Riyadh na kasama ang Russia. Pinuntirya rin ni Trump ang di umano'y mababang 4% approval rating ni Volodymyr Zelensky na ayon sa mga eksperto, ang naturang approval rating na sinasabi ni Trump ay walang totoong basihan. Dagdag pa rito na nais ni Trump at iba pang mga bansa na mapalitan si Zelensky bilang presidente ng bansa, ngunit naantala lamang naman ang eleksyon dahil sa martial law na ipinatupad nito sa kanyang bansa.
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating. And yeah, I would say that, you know, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people have to, wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, like, you know, it's been a long time since we've had an election. That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
Naghahanda na ang Qatar para sa pagsisimula ng ikalawang yugto ng Gaza ceasefire agreement sa pagitan ng Hamas at ng Israel.
We are working towards implementing the agreement as it was signed, which means that by the 42nd day we hope that we can move to the second phase. Obviously the negotiations over the second phase have not yet started, and we are pushing with our partners in the mediation to make sure that they start as soon as possible in order for us to have enough time to discuss them before the proposed end of phase 1.
Nilinaw nitong hindi pa nagsisimula ang negosasyon sa ceasefire at maaaring sa mga susunod na araw ay kanila na itong uumpisahan. Sinabi naman ni Foreign Ministry official Majed Al-Ansari, nakikita niya ang magandang sitwasyon dahil sa mapayapang pagpapatupad ng unang yugto ng ceasefire. Ilan lamang sa kanyang napuna ay dapat dagdagan ang pagbibigay ng humanitarian aid sa Gaza dahil sa marami pa rin ang naaapektuhan ng nasabing kaguluhan.
المساعدات الإنسانية إلى كرت تفاوضي في هذه المفاوضات هو بحد ذاته جريمة، وبالتالي اليوم نحن أيضا نكرر دعوتنا إلى الفتح الشامل لدخول المساعدات إلى قطاع غزة بما يمكننا من وصول هذه المساعدات. الكثير من هذه المساعدات تقبع الآن على الحدود بانتظار فرصة لدخولها، ولا شك لدي أن هناك حاجة كبيرة جدا في قطاع غزة لن تتحقق كما قلت بكل هذه المساعدات، ولكن هناك استعداد لكثير من الدول ومنها دولة قطر لزيادة هذه المساعدات طالما كان هناك فرصة.
Una na sinabi ni Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar na handa na silang dumalo sa pag-uusap para sa ikalawang bahagi ng negosasyon ng Gaza deal. Magugulita pong nagkaroon ng tatlong bahagi ang ceasefire deal sa Gaza kung saan magpapakawala ng bihag ang mga Hamas kapalit naman ng mga Palestinong nakakulong sa Israel. Ang huling bahagi ng ceasefire ay ang tuluyang pag-alis ng mga sundalo ng Israel na nakatalaga sa Gaza.
We will begin negotiations on second phase of the hostage deal. Israel is committed to our goal to ensure the release of all our hostages. We also committed to all the objectives of the war as were decided by the Security Cabinet. The most important thing is that the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria continue with their pay-for-slay strategy, continue to encourage terrorism, continue with incitement in textbooks, in kindergartens, in schools, in media, in mosques. So we don't trust the PA to lead a process of de-radicalization, which is the most important thing for the Palestinian people themselves.
Susunod, higit sa 100 balyena stranded sa Tasmania.
US tariffs nakatanggap ng malawakang batikos.
At kilalanin kung sino ba tong American rapper na naabsuelto sa kanyang gun trial. Mga detalye po ng mga balita niyan at iba pa sa pagbabalik na Mata ng Agila International.
Samahan kami sa makabuluhang kwentuhan na may kasamang kasiyahan na puno ng impormasyon at nagbibigay inspirasyon sa buong pamilya. Tuwing Sabado at Linggo, alas 8 hanggang alas 9 ng umaga, dito lamang sa Net 25. Ito ang
Nagbabalik ang Mata ng Agila International at sa pagpapatuloy pa rin po ng ating mga balita ngayong gabi. Everyone must go. Yan ang bagong slogan ng New Zealand na makikita sa mga tao o ng mga tao sa mga nagagandahang landscapes ng nasabing bansa. Ayon sa New Zealand government ay nagkakahalaga ng $285,000 ang bago nilang tourism campaign. Subalit, alam nyo ba na marami ang bumabatiko sa nasabing tagline dahil ang pahayag na everyone must go ay may dalawang kahulugan umano. Pwedeng nag-iimbita ito ng mga tao para bisitahin ang New Zealand. Pero sabi naman ng iba, isa rin itong banta para paalisin sa bansa ang mga Kiwi o New Zealanders. Ipinagtanggol naman ng gobyerno ang tourism campaign nito. Sinabi ni Prime Minister Christopher Luxon na isang mabuting bagay na maraming usap-usapan tungkol sa bagong slogan. Binanggit naman ni Tourism Minister Louise Upston na ang Everyone Must Go tagline ay naglalayong magbigay ng mensahe sa mga taga-Australia na isang must-visit destination ang New Zealand.
Isang lalaki sa India ang kamuntik maipit sa umaandar na tren matapos subukang sumakay rito. Buti na lamang ay nakabantay ang isang rail officer sa platform at agad nahila ang lalaki mula sa awang patungo sa ligtas na lugar. Paliwanag ng biktima, nagmamadali na kasi siya dahil papaalis na ang tren at dahil sa bilis ng pag-andar nito ay nawalan siya ng balanse at nahulog sa awang. Malaki naman ang pasasalamat ng lalaki sa rail officer at dahil sa kanyang mabilis na aksyon ay hindi siya napahamak. Muli pinaalala ng railway station sa publiko na huwag subukang sumakay ng tren kapag paalis na ito mula sa platform.
Pighati ang nadama ng mga magulang ng isang 3 anyos na batang lalaki matapos malaman nila na nalunod ang kanilang anak sa isang water pit sa area ng ginagawang bahay sa Hyderabad, India. Ayon sa ulat ng pulisya, sinubukan ng mga otoridad na iligtas ang bata, subalit wala na itong buhay nang naiahon mula sa tubig. Napag-alaman ng mga otoridad na iniwang bukas at walang safety barrier ang water pit. At dahil dito, nagsagawa ng hiwalay na investigasyon ang pulisya laban sa may-ari ng ginagawang bahay.
Ayon sa mga lokal na otoridad, higit sa 150 mga beach whales o isang uri po ng balyena ang namataan sa baybayin ng Tasmania sa Australia. Kinumpirma ng Marine Conservation ng estado na nasa 157 false killer whales, isang species ng dolphin, ang inanod malapit sa bayan ng Arthur River. Anila mula sa nasabing bilang ay 90 sa mga ito ay buhay pa ang umaasang makababalik sa dagat. Sa ngayon, nakikipagtulungan ng Marine Conservation Program sa Tasmania Parks and Wildlife Service para agarang solusyonan ang mass whale stranding na ito. Nakikipag-ugnayan kasi ang mga ito sa oras dahil kaya lamang makasurvive ang mga naturang hayop ng 6 o kaya lamang makasurvive ng 6 na oras sa lupa ayon sa mga eksperto. Hinimok naman ng mga otoridad na publiko na huwag lapitan ng mga hayop para na rin sa kaligtasan nila.
Naging dahilan ng malawakang pagkondena sa iba't ibang bahagi ng mundo ang pagpapataw ng taripa ng Estados Unidos sa angkat na bakal at aluminum. Isama pa rito ang tinatawag ni Pangulong Donald Trump na reciprocal tariff sa lahat ng trading partners nito. Alamin po natin ang balita mula kay Anna Kui.
Ayon sa mga eksperto, ang taripa at kontra-taripa o reciprocal tariffs ay malamang na magsisimula ng trade war o giyerang pangkalakalan. Kontra sa pahayag ni US President Donald Trump na iindahin ng ibang bansa ang taripa ng Estados Unidos, sinabi ni Professor Chirikadan Veramani ng Center for Development Studies sa India na babalikatin ng mga mamamayan ng Estados Unidos ang epekto nito.
It can lead to a kind of trade war. And trade war is not good for anyone. Trump is saying that the foreign countries will have to pay the tariff. No, we will collect money from the foreign countries, but actually he is going to collect the money from the US consumer. Because the impact of tariff is that the prices for everything for the US households will go up.
Dagdag ni Veramani, imbis na palakasin ng US exports tulad ng pag-asa ni Trump, kabaligtaran nito ang marahil na mangyayari.
Trump is believing that when you impose a tariffs on a particular product, US production of those products will go up, and then they will be able to export to other countries. But that will not happen because a tariff, an import tariff, is indirectly a tax on the exports. Why? Because when intermediate goods are coming from other countries, and you pay high tariffs for imported intermediate goods, the cost of producing products, will go up. So it is indirectly, it will act as a tax on their export. So export competitiveness will go down.
Ang negatibong epekto ng mga taripang ito ay hindi lamang mararamdaman sa US. Sa Vietnam, iniinda na ng mga residente ang talbog nito.
Về ngành hàng nhôm thì đối với Việt Nam thì cũng sẽ gặp một cái chút khó khăn. Vì bản thân là từ trước đến giờ thì cái ngành hàng nhôm của Việt Nam ấy thì đánh thuế vào Hoa Kỳ chỉ có 10 đến 15%. Nhưng bây giờ đến 25% thì cái việc mà mặt hàng nhôm mà đưa vào thị trường Hoa Kỳ nó sẽ gặp khó khăn hơn.
Bukod sa taripa sa aluminyo at bakal, nababahala rin ang Vietnam sa reciprocal tariffs na inanunsyo ni Trump.
Theo cái quan điểm mà đánh thuế qua lại thì mình là cái nước nhỏ bé, mình nhập là nhiều, chứ mình xuất thì chả đáng mấy. Thế thì cái mà cứ thuế qua lại như vậy thì mình thiệt trước, mình sẽ khó khăn hơn họ rất nhiều. Ai cũng phải sản xuất, ai cũng phải nhập vào. Thì với cái áp chế độ thuế như thế thì toàn thế giới bị chứ không riêng gì Việt Nam.
Sinasabing ang talbog ng taripa ng US ay magkakaroon ng matinding epekto sa maliliit na bansa tulad ng Vietnam, mga bansang nakasalalay sa imports.
Giá thành trong nước sẽ tăng bởi vì Việt Nam chưa tự chủ được nguồn cung nguyên liệu và các phụ liệu sản xuất, lên giá thành của mình vẫn phụ thuộc vào nước ngoài, lên giá thành sẽ tăng rất là mạnh.
Ana Cui para sa mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Tumaas ng 34% o 72.6 billion euros ang export ng Ireland sa Estados Unidos. Samantala, bahagyang bumaba naman ng 22.5 billion euros ang imports nito sa US. Nangangahulugan ito na may goods trade surplus ang Ireland sa US na nagkakahalaga ng higit sa 50 billion euros. Kaya nila may trade surplus ang Ireland sa US ay dahil sa pag-e-export ng mga pharmaceutical manufacturers ng mga gamot at medical equipment sa Estados Unidos. Sinabi ng Central Statistics Office ng Ireland na ang mga trade pattern na ito ay may political significance simula nang bumalik si President Donald Trump sa White House.
Inakusahan ng South Korea na binibigay ng DeepSeek ang kanilang user data sa Chinese firm na ByteDance. Ayon sa ulat ng Yonhap News Agency na kumpirma ng Data Protection Regulator ng Seoul ang naturang iligal na gawain ng DeepSeek at dahil po dito ay inalis na ang DeepSeek application sa mga app stores ng South Korea para maprotektahan ang data ng kanilang mga mamamayan. Subalit bago ito i-pull out sa Seoul ay umabot sa higit 1 milyon ang download count nito sa Apple at Google Play stores. Sa kabila nito, pwede pa rin ma-access ang DeepSeek na ibang users via web browser. Samantala, hindi naman nagbigay ng pahayag ang ByteDance sa pagkakadawit nito sa aligasyon ng Seoul.
Plano ngayon ni Dallas Mavericks guard Kyrie Irving na irepresenta ang Australia kung saan siya isinilang sa mga international competition. Ang 9-time NBA All-Star ay nagwagi ng gintong medalya sa Team USA noong 2016 Olympics sa Rio de Janeiro. Mayroon kasi itong dual citizenship na isang American at Australian. Isinilang siya sa Melbourne noong 1992 habang ang ama naman niya na si Derek ay naglaro sa Bullets sa Southeast Australian Basketball League. May ilang hamon ngayon na kakaharapin sa Irving dahil base sa FIBA ruling ay dapat ang isang manlalaro ay hindi pa nakapagre-represent ng isang bansa sa mga international competition. Noong nakaraang taon kasi ay nabigo si Klay Thompson na maglaro sa Bahamas na bansa kung saan isinilang ang ama dahil sa ruling ng FIBA.
Samantala, nagsimulang matanggap na po ng mga miyembro ng Philippine men's curling team ang kanilang mga cash incentives mula sa gobyerno. Kasunod ito sa pagkakakuha nila ng makasaysayang ginto medalya na sinalihan nila sa Asian Winter Games sa China. Ayon sa Philippine Olympic Committee o POC, ibinigay na nila ang bawat miyembro o sa bawat miyembro ang tig 275,000 pesos bilang incentives mula sa POC Executive Board. Sinabi ni POC President Abraham Tolentino, ang nasabing halaga ay maliit lamang kumpara sa mga sakripisyo at mga sariling gastos ng koponan habang sila ay nagsasanay. Ang grupo ay binubuo ni Mark Feister, Christian Holler, Enrico Feister, Alan Ray, alternate at Curling Pilipinas President Benjo de la Rmente. Ang mga Swiss-based athletes ay naghahanda na rin para sa Milano Cortina Winter Olympics na magaganap na sa susunod na taon.
Not guilty o napatunayang hindi nagkasala ang US rapper na si A$AP Rocky sa 2 kaso ng felony assault. Itinamanda si Rocky na may legal name na Rocky Mayers ng dati nitong kaibigan ng firearm assault. Sinabi ni Terrell Efron na pinaputukan daw siya ng singer ng baril noong sila ay magtalo noong November 6, 2021. Pero itinanggi ni Rocky ang mga paratang ni Efron at sinabi na isang prop gun ang kanyang hawak. Sinabi rin ng singer na nais lamang ng dati niyang kaibigan na magkapera kung kaya't siya ay kinasuhan. Hindi napigilan ng singer na umiyak ng basahin sa kanyang desisyon ng korte. Niyakap niya ang kanyang mga abogado at nagpasalamat din sa jury. Susunod, mga pulis sa Connecticut sinalba ang isang baby seal.
Ating kilalanin ang isang Iraqi na may kakaibang hobby.
At abangan ang iba pang mga storya pagdating ni Alma Angeles at ng Mata ng Agila World News. Wag po kayong bibitiw, magbabalik pa ang Mata ng Agila International.
Sabado at Linggo, 8 to 9 a.m. Dito lang yan sa Net 25. Ito ang tahanan. Ako po si Ate Sherilyn.
O palangga ko, huwag kang lalayo. O ang gusto ko, lagi.
Hello, ako si Max Gilbert. Hilig niyo ba mga tugtugang Pinoy? Kung gayon, samahan niyo ako at ang aking latest single na Palangga Ko sa Letters and Music ngayong Sabado, 1 to 2 p.m. Siyempre, dito lamang sa Net 25. Kita-kits!
Ng puso ko, ikaw nagpalambot ng puso kong bato. Palangga ko, ikaw ang buong buhay ko. Palangga ko.
Na-rescue ng New Haven Police Department ang isang pag-alagalang baby seal sa lansangan ng Connecticut malapit sa Yale University. Ayon sa pulisya, may isang napadaan sa lugar na nagulat nito sa kanila. Sinabi ni Officer Christian Brockhart na na-underweight ang baby seal. Anya, dinala na nila ang hayop sa Mystic Aquarium para sa rehabilitasyon nito. Mula naman sa pagsusuri ng mga veterinaryo, pinaniniwala ang nasa 5 to 6 weeks old ang gray seal. Ang mga gray seals ay karaniwang matatagpuan sa baybayin ng North Atlantic Ocean ayon sa National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Ito naman po, isang lalaki sa Iraq ang ginawang business ang kanyang bird keeping hobby at ngayon ay kumikita siya ng halos $100. Depende po yan sa pares ng ibon na kanyang ibinibenta. Kilalanin natin si Mushtaq Taleb, ang may-ari ng bird sanctuary. Ayon sa kanya, sinimulan niya ang kanyang business taong 2019 mula sa pagbebenta ng ilang ornamental birds. Pero sinabi O sa hindi niya inaasahan na pagkakataon ay ilalago naman ang kanyang hobby turned business sa mga susunod na taon. Maliwanag ng Iraqi, nagtayo siya ng bird sanctuary bilang lugar na magdadala ng peace of mind sa kanyang mga customers. Sa ngayon, nagmamay-ari si Taleb ng higit sa 700 ibon, kung saan ay namumugad ang mga ito sa 4 na sulok ng kanyang bird sanctuary.
Nakakatuwa, no? Alam mo ba, di ba, it's been said na yung mga bahay daw na pinamamahayan o pinamumugaran ng mga ibon ay dahil they find peace doon sa bahay.
That's
so,
nice.
di ba, it kind of says something about how you live in your home. So, halimbawa, mga pamilya kayo na may living in harmony, masaya, happy family. Umuwi doon yung mga ibon doon. So, siguro ganun yung kay
At saka siguro it will encourage us also to, lalo na yung mga space sa bahay na magtanim siguro ng mga puno, mga halaman. Kasi usually nandiyan yan, di ba? Isa lang na ano dyan, disadvantage or advantage, whatever you call it, however you perceive it, yung paggising mo sa umaga, talagang tweet. Ayun. Masarap naman siya sa tenga.
Correct.
Masarap sa tenga. Except pag puyat ka. So, dapat po after po ng mata ng Agila World News, ay matulog na po kayo.
Yun. Para paggising mo sa umaga, kasabay mong gumigising yung mga ibon, hindi yung parang naaabala ka, kundi music to your ears.
Diba? Kaya nga yung ibang chimes, I'm so sorry, yung ibang mga chimes, diba? Bird sounds sila.
Tama.
Kasi masarap naman sila pakinggan. Ayan. So, tingnan naman natin. Ito na po ang kasunod natin. Narito na po siya at tanungin natin mamaya, Nina, kung may narinig din siya mga birds sa kanyang bahay. So, tandaan ha, mula Lunes hanggang Biyernes, narito kami ni Nina para maghatid ng balita sa amang dako ng mundo. Muli ako po si Rikki Mathay.
Ako si Rikki, Alagao, Flores. Ito pa rin ang mata ng Agila International. Para po sa mga balita naman na nangyari rin sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo, punta naman tayo kay Alma Angeles para sa mata ng Agila World News. Take it away, Alma.
Thank you, Nina and Rikki. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for Net 25 World News. On tonight's headlines. American and Russian officials have met in Saudi Arabia and reached an agreement to end the war in Ukraine. A potential peace deal after nearly 3 years of conflict. Could this be the breakthrough we've been waiting for? Stay with us as we break down what they've agreed to and what happens next. Net 25 World News starts now. In a significant diplomatic development, U.S. and Russian officials convened in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to discuss potential resolutions to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The U.S. delegation, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, engaged in over 4 hours of discussions with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and other Russian representatives. The talks, hosted by Saudi officials, were described as serious and businesslike, focusing on normalizing relations and exploring avenues for peace. Here's more. On the left, the U.S. delegation, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. In the middle, the Saudi hosts, their Foreign Minister and Security Advisor. And on the right, the Russians, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and a presidential aide to Vladimir Putin. Now, this image was unthinkable after 2022. Remember when Western officials would get up and leave when Lavrov started speaking? Yet here we are, the Americans and Russians talked for more than 4 hours. Now, the United States has released a statement outlining 4 key areas of the agreement. First, they'll establish a mechanism to address what they're calling irritants in the relationship. While that term remains vague, both sides hope to normalize relations and potentially appoint ambassadors. Second, and perhaps most crucial, both sides will appoint teams to discuss Ukraine. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz was clear about the priorities.
This needs to be a permanent end to the war and not a temporary end as we've seen in the past. We know just the practical reality is that there is going to be some discussion of territory and there's going to be discussion of security guarantees.
Third, post-war cooperation. The official statement reads, "We agreed to lay the groundwork for future cooperation on matters of mutual geopolitical interest and historic economic and investment opportunities which will emerge from a successful end to the conflict in Ukraine." Fourth, both sides promised to maintain engagement, including the possibility of a Putin-Trump meeting, though no date has been set. Now here's where things get interesting. Russia has signaled its first major concession, and it's significant. While they're asking Ukraine to drop NATO membership aspirations, they're now open to Ukraine joining the EU.
This is the sovereign right of any country. We are talking about political integration and economic integration processes. And here, of course, no one can dictate anything to any country, and we are not going to do so. We do have completely different approach though to questions related to security and links of Ukraine to military and security alliances. That approach is completely different and you know full well about it.
In what appears to be a coordinated move, the U.S. has already agreed to the NATO question.
You know, a big part of the problem was Russia for many, many years, long before Putin said you could never have NATO involved with Ukraine. Now, they've said that. That's been like written in stone. And somewhere along the line, Biden said, no, they should be able to join NATO. Well, then Russia has somebody right on their doorstep, and I could understand their feeling about that.
Effectively closing the door on Ukraine's membership. But today's meeting suggests this is just the beginning of a series of potential concessions. Perhaps most significantly, Washington has indicated that sanctions relief is on the table. The U.S. position is clear. Once a deal is struck, sanctions will have to be lifted, and this could extend to territorial compromises as well, though the specifics remain unclear. But where was Ukraine in all this? President Zelensky, also in the Middle East today, wasn't invited to the talks. His response was unequivocal.
Ukraine will not take part in the talks in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine did not know anything about them. Ukraine regards any negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine as ones that have no result, and we cannot recognize any agreements about us made without us, and will not recognize such agreements.
Secretary Rubio tried to address these concerns.
In order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are. We're certainly not going to negotiate this today or in a press conference for that matter. But, and there are other parties that have sanctions. The European Union is going to have to be at the table at some point because they have sanctions as well that have been imposed.
But here's the catch. The U.S. is driving a hard bargain. They're seeking a 50% share of Ukraine's rare earth minerals, plus access to ports, energy, and infrastructure. While Zelensky has rejected this deal, the Riyadh talks may have left him with limited options.
The question is not just about simply taking the resource. The question is what you invest, so that something comes out of this resource. We are not just a simple supplier for raw materials, and I think this point should be clearly reflected in the document.
In fact, Zelensky was scheduled to visit Saudi Arabia this week, but postponed his trip after these talks. The Riyadh reset has effectively boxed him into a corner, with Europe possibly being his last hope.
It is clear that the European Union, just like the USA, must make a contribution to securing peace, once peace has finally been achieved. But there must be no division of security and involvement between the USA and Europe. And as I said, don't take the fourth step before taking the first. The first step is for Russia to realize that it cannot simply continue its criminal war of aggression.
Einsehen muss, dass es seinen verbrecherischen Angriffskrieg nicht einfach fortsetzen kann.
While Russia seems thrilled with the talks, calling them positive and praising the Trump team for departing from Biden's position, we're still dealing with statements of intent rather than concrete measures. But make no mistake, the very fact that America and Russia are sitting at the same table discussing Ukraine's future marks a seismic shift in international relations. The key question now is whether these initial concessions will lead to a broader deal and what might mean for Ukraine's future. With the U.S. already showing flexibility on NATO membership and sanctions, and Russia opening the door to EU integration, we may be witnessing the first steps toward a dramatic reshaping of Eastern European geopolitics. Now, the U.S. and Russia have agreed to restore diplomatic relations at the meeting in Saudi Arabia between senior American and Russian officials. The meeting also focused on the Ukraine-Russia war and how to bring it to an end. Here's more from Thomas I. Likeness.
The talks are a prelude, a first step in negotiating an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. Only American and Russian officials attended the meeting in Riyadh. Ukraine and the EU watched from afar on the sidelines. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says reaching peace is going to be a long and difficult journey. He says he came away from Tuesday's meeting convinced that Russia is serious about ending the war.
Whether we can ultimately reach that outcome will obviously depend on every side in this conflict's willingness to agree to certain things. So I think it's important to have this meeting because we haven't really had much engagement with the Russians for almost 3 years.
Rubio says there's going to have to be some give and take to settle things, and he hints there could be some changes to the Ukrainian-Russian border.
In order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are. We're certainly not going to negotiate this today or in a press conference for that matter.
Presently, Russia controls about 1/5 of Ukraine's land and doesn't want to give that up. Another sticking point is possible Ukrainian membership in NATO. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says allowing Ukraine to join the alliance is a direct threat to Russia and unacceptable.
We explained to our colleagues today what President Putin has repeatedly stressed, that the expansion of NATO, the absorption of Ukraine by the North Atlantic Alliance, is a direct threat to the interests of the Russian Federation, a direct threat to our sovereignty.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had not been invited to the meeting. He says negotiations should not take place behind the backs of Ukraine. Zelensky says he doesn't believe either Kyiv or Moscow can win on the battlefield, but he questions Russian President Vladimir Putin's sincerity about ending the war.
If there is goodwill to end the war, I don't believe that Putin wants it. But if there is a will, then there should definitely be a prisoner swap first of all.
Back in the United States, President Donald Trump spoke from his Mar-a-Lago club. He says he's encouraged by Tuesday's talks.
Well, much more confident. They were very good. Russia wants to do something. They want to stop the savage barbarianism. I mean, what's going on over there? It's soldiers are being killed by the thousands on a weekly basis. It's ridiculous.
While he says Russia wants peace, Trump had few kind words for Ukraine, and he dismisses Zelensky's concerns that Ukraine has not been part of the peace talks so far.
And I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their side.
Trump also says Ukraine should hold elections.
A situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating. And yeah, I would say that, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people have to, wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, it's been a long time since we've had an election? That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
And the U.S. president said he would support Europe deploying peacekeeping troops in Ukraine as part of a peace deal. Meanwhile, European leaders watch, hoping however this war is resolved, there won't be further Russian aggression leading to future changes to the European map. Thomas I. Likeness, Net 25 World News.
And as those talks in Riyadh wrapped up, Ukraine reacted with a mix of gloom and dismay. Officials in Kiev have expressed concerns that the Trump administration is appeasing Moscow. Adding insult to injury, the negotiations in Saudi Arabia began just hours after Russia launching a barrage of drone attacks across Ukraine. Tragically, at least 2 people were killed, 26 injured in those strikes. One of the drones struck the top floor of a residential building in the central city of Dolinska, leaving a mother and her 2 children injured and hospitalized. A difficult night, according to local governor Andriy Rikki. And even as the talks in Riyadh concluded, air raid sirens wailed across Kiev, sending millions scrambling for shelter due to the threat of Russian ballistic missiles. Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to President Zelensky's office, called it absurd for Moscow to talk about peace while simultaneously killing Ukrainians. He stated that the latest barrage of 176 drones represented Russia's true negotiating position. China opposes Vietnam's construction activities on a disputed islet in the South China Sea known as the Bark Canada Reef, its foreign ministry said today. Occupied by Vietnam since the 1980s, the reef in the Spratly Islands is claimed by several countries in a dispute that has intensified as China and the U.S. vie for influence in the strategic Southeast Asian nation.
南沙群岛是中国的固有领土，百礁是南沙群岛的一部分。中方一贯反对有关国家在非法侵占的岛礁上开展建设活动。
Vietnam's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to our request for comment. The study added that Vietnam had dredged a channel 299 meters or 327 yards in width at the reef, sufficient to berth large vessels such as warships. Last year, China rebuffed Vietnam's claims of sovereignty over the Parasil and Spratly Island chains, saying its own claims to the two were backed by history. Vietnam has previously cited full legal basis and ample historical evidence for its claims to the reef. Tensions are escalating once again in the South China Sea. The Philippine Coast Guard is accusing the Chinese Navy of dangerous and reckless behavior after a Chinese helicopter flew within just 3 meters, that's about 10 feet, of a Philippine government aircraft. Now, this happened Tuesday near the Scarborough Shoal, a hotly contested area in the South China Sea. The Philippine aircraft was conducting what they called a maritime domain awareness flight, essentially patrolling the area within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. The Philippine Coast Guard called the Chinese Navy's actions a clear violation and blatant disregard of aviation regulations. Philippine Coast Guard in a statement said this reckless action posed a serious risk to the safety of the pilots and the passengers.
The helicopter should have observed the proper and safe distance. Dahil alam naman natin how dangerous it will be. Konting banggaan lang, no? With that close proximity can lead to disaster. As far as our action is concerned, what we did is legitimate and routine maritime domain awareness flight. It is not illegal, and if you're going to ask me who is the one carrying out such aggressive and illegal actions, that will only be the People's Republic of China.
China, however, is disputing the Philippine account. The Chinese Military Southern Theater Command claims the Philippine aircraft illegally intruded into Chinese airspace and that the Philippines is spreading false narratives. They said they took action to monitor, warn, and drive away the aircraft. The United States has condemned the Chinese actions, with the U.S. ambassador to Manila calling the Chinese helicopters' maneuvers dangerous. In a significant development, Thai Prime Minister Paitongtarn Shinawatra announced today that approximately 7,000 individuals rescued from illegal call center operations in Myanmar are set to be transferred to Thailand. The Thai government is moving swiftly to address this pressing issue. In a related effort, China is preparing to repatriate about 200 of its nationals found in scam compounds along the Thai-Myanmar border. This initiative is part of a broader multinational crackdown on illicit online operations in the region. The UN reports that criminal gangs have trafficked hundreds of thousands of individuals into these scam operations across Southeast Asia, with many victims forced to work under deplorable conditions. The Chinese nationals are scheduled to return home on a commercial flight departing Thursday from Mae Sot, Thailand, a town bordering Myanmar's Miyawadi. This operation underscores the collaborative efforts between Thailand, China, and Myanmar to combat these fraudulent networks. Myanmar authorities have recently detained 273 foreigners in scam operating compounds around Miyawadi, and this action coincides with a visit by senior Chinese officials to frontier towns on both sides of the border, highlighting the intensified regional focus on dismantling these illegal operations. Now, despite operating for years, these centers have only recently come under renewed scrutiny. The turning point was the rescue and return to China of actor Wang Xing, who was abducted in Thailand after being lured with the promise of a lucrative job. And this case has brought international attention to the pervasive issue of human trafficking and forced labor in scam operations throughout Southeast Asia. Now, back here in the country, the Bureau of Immigration has raised concerns about the increasing number of Filipinos being lured to work for offshore companies in other Asian countries, which operate similarly to Philippine offshore gaming operators or POGOs. In a press briefing at the palace, BI spokesperson Dana Sandoval highlighted that approximately 118 Filipinos have been recruited to these so-called scam hubs, which masquerades as business process outsourcing firms.
Usapan kung paano yung arrangements. They are offered like the last one I saw was 50,000 pesos a month, free board and lodging, free meals, free travel. So ganda ng offer. But the truth is it's not real kasi pagdating doon, it's really a scam hub. So doble-doble layers yung pagkaka-victimize doon sa mga kababayan natin kasi sila po ay pinapunta doon, naloko, pero hindi pala totoo yung trabaho, hindi sapat yung sweldo sa kanila or hindi sila pinapasweldo.
And the BI urges Filipinos to exercise caution and thoroughly verify overseas job offers to ensure their legitimacy and to protect themselves from potential exploitation.
So allow me to issue a stern warning to our kababayans. If you see a posting in Meta or Facebook or Telegram or wherever asking you to go to any of the following countries as CSR, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, I'd rather not go to those places because you have a 50-50 chance of being tortured as estimated, as indicated by Ma'am Dana. 50-50 chance of being tortured. And we have rescued Filipinos and Filipinas who were actual torture victims. We have videos of Filipinos being tortured in Miyawadi na na-rescue namin. And hindi natin kayang sikmurain. Then lastly, I'm calling on all our Filipino nationals here in the Philippines. If PAOK arrests you together with foreign nationals in scamming hubs, we will file criminal charges against you.
And the news continues here on Net 25. We'll be right back.
Andyan pala kayo! Gusto nyo bang matuto ng mga nutritional food at easy recipe
abangan ninyo kami tuwing alas 8 hanggang alas 9 ng umaga, Saturday and Sunday. Dito lang yan sa Ito ang Tahanan.
In a bold move, just months ahead of the federal elections, billionaire Clive Palmer has launched his new Trumpet of Patriots party, drawing inspiration from U.S. President Donald Trump. With a net worth of $2.1 billion and a history in politics as the former head of the United Australia Party, Palmer vows to contest all 150 seats in the lower house and the Senate. He promises to make Australia great again by championing policies modeled after Trump's approach amidst growing discontent over rising living costs. Take a look.
Australian billionaire Clive Palmer launched a political party on Wednesday, citing inspiration from U.S. President Donald Trump just months before the country's federal election. The mining magnate is Australia's 18th richest person, with a net worth of $2.1 billion, according to Forbes. He previously led the right-wing Australia Party and served as a lawmaker for 3 years from 2013. Palmer said Wednesday that his new Trumpet of Patriots party plans to run candidates in all 150 seats in Australia's lower house and the Senate.
The party believes in the policies of Donald Trump, which has shown to be effective in bringing management back on track. Peter Dutton has stated he's no Donald Trump, and we agree with him. Albanese's presided over a declining standard of living for our country in each and every year he served as Prime Minister. Australia needs Trump policies. Australians want them.
Palmer also said his party would, quote, make Australia great again, referencing Trump's plans to cut government size. He was also critical of mass immigration and said that the party would only recognize two genders, reflecting positions also favored by Trump.
Australia should be for all Australians living here.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has not announced the election date, which could be as early as March after the central bank lowered interest rates on Tuesday. His government has seen its popularity drop because of rising living costs.
U.S. President Donald Trump said he intends to impose auto tariffs in the neighborhood of 25% and similar duties on semiconductors and pharmaceutical imports, the latest in a series of measures threatening to upend international trade. Take a look.
Donald Trump has played his next move on tariffs. The U.S. president said Tuesday that he would impose levies of about 25% on imported cars and similar duties on drugs and chips. Trump says his action on tariffs is already producing results.
I do want to say while I'm up here, I've been contacted by some of the biggest companies in the world, and because of what we're doing economically and through tariffs and taxes and incentives, they want to come back into the United States. And we'll be announcing various very large companies, the biggest actually, and they'll be coming back having to do with chips and having to do also with cars.
Trump also said more details on the auto tariffs would come on April 2nd, a day after cabinet members are due to report to him on options for new measures. He has long complained about what he sees as unfair treatment of US automotive exports. The EU, for example, imposes a 10% levy on vehicle imports, or 4 times the duty imposed by the US. However, Washington collects a 25% tariff on most imported pickup trucks, protecting a lucrative part of the market for domestic makers like Ford and Chevrolet. Trump says tariffs on drugs and chips will also start at 25% or above, and then go substantially higher over the course of the year. He didn't set a date for starting those levies, saying he wants to give pharmaceutical and tech firms time to set up US factories. Since his inauguration a month ago, Trump has stacked an extra 10% tariff on all imports from China. He's also set a March 12th start date for tariffs on imports of steel and aluminum. And while he has postponed measures targeting Mexico and Canada, he's also told his team to draw up reciprocal tariffs matching those imposed by all trading partners. Major export stocks were among the decliners in Wednesday morning trade in Asia following the news. In Japan, auto brands Mazda and Subaru both fell around 2% in early trade, as did drug maker Daiichi Sankyo. Over in Taiwan, chip giant TSMC fell around 1%.
Heavy snow has hit Japan today, February 19, as a cold front sweeps across the central regions of the country. In Niigata Prefecture, where over 3 meters of snow have already fallen this winter, roads and buildings are now blanketed in fresh snow. The Japan Meteorological Agency has issued a heavy snow advisory, predicting up to 70 centimeters, or about 28 inches, could fall in just 24 hours along the Sea of Japan coast. A JMA spokesperson said, "We expect the winter weather to peak today before temperatures start to rise next week." The cold snap has brought extremely low temperatures, with Morioka recording a chilling minus 21.2 degrees Celsius this morning. Meanwhile, Sapporo saw 42 centimeters of snowfall in just 12 hours, marking a record for February. As the snow continues to fall, disruptions are being felt across the country. Flights have been canceled and train services delayed due to the severe weather conditions. More than 150 false killer whales have stranded. And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on Net 25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us. Good night.